The restaurant was buzzing with activity as the lunch rush reached its peak. Waiters and waitresses weaved through tables with trays full of food and drinks, their movements precise and practiced. At one corner of the floor, a young black waitress was moving quickly, taking orders and serving plates with a calm determination that came from years of experience. Her uniform was neat, her shoes polished, and her smile was warm. But there was a quiet tension in her eyes, the kind that comes from carrying too much responsibility. She had been working double shifts for months, balancing this job and another. All to make sure her children had what they needed. She approached a table where a few business executives had just been seated. They were dressed in sharp suits and had the air of people who were used to being in control. She greeted them politely, took their drink orders, and made small talk with a professional, courteous tone. As she returned from the bar with their drinks, she accidentally knocked over a small glass of water. The water spilled onto the table, and one of the executives flinched as it soaked a pile of important-looking papers. The waitress immediately apologized, grabbing napkins and trying to clean up the mess as quickly as she could. The executive frowned, his voice sharp, and she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had seen plenty of spills before, and she knew accidents happened. But something about the way he spoke made her feel exposed and small. "I'm so sorry, sir." "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said sincerely, her hands trembling slightly. Just then, a man in a crisp suit, who had been sitting quietly at the far end of the restaurant, got up and walked over. He moved with a certain authority, the kind that drew people's attention without them even realizing it. He had been observing the scene, and his gaze was steady and critical. This man was the CEO of the company that owned the restaurant chain, though no one in the restaurant knew it at the time. He was used to control two things going exactly the way he wanted, and he did not have patience for mistakes. He stood over the waitress and looked down at the mess. She looked up at him, startled by his sudden presence, and tried to explain herself. "It was an accident, sir. I didn't mean to spill the water. You can clean it up right away," she said, her voice polite but firm. The CEO shook his head slowly, his expression hard. "That's not acceptable," he said in a voice that brooked no argument. "I need someone who pays attention to every detail. You're dismissed." The words hit her like a punch. She had worked so hard, done everything she could to provide for her family. Damn, and now she was being fired in front of a room full of strangers, all because of a small mistake. Her heart raced, and for a moment she felt like she might cry. But she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and nodded. "I understand," she said quietly. She gathered her things and walked toward the exit, trying to keep her composure as the restaurant staff and customers watched in silence. As she stepped outside, the cool air hit her face, and she paused for a moment, taking it in. She felt a mixture of anger, frustration, and sadness. This job had meant so much to her, not just as a source of income, but as a place where she felt like she could contribute, be part of something bigger. And now, it was gone, taken away in an instant. She walked to her car, her mind racing. She thought about her children, waiting for her at home, and the bills that were piling up. She thought about the other jobs she had been doing, the long hours, the sacrifices she had made. And yet, even in the midst of all this, there was a small spark inside her, determination not to let this break her. She knew she would find a way. She would get through this. Because giving up was not an option. Back inside, the CEO returned to his table, his expression calm, almost indifferent. He had made his decision, and in his mind, it was the right one. But as he sipped his coffee and watched the staff continue their work, a small part of him wondered if he had been too harsh. He shook the thought away, telling himself that mistakes like this could not be tolerated. In his world, perfection was expected, and anything less was a failure. Meanwhile, the staff were murmuring among themselves, sharing their opinions quietly. Some were sympathetic to the young waitress, shaking their heads at the CEO's actions, while others tried to justify it, saying that he was just maintaining standards. The atmosphere was tense. The usual hum of the restaurant replaced by a quiet undercurrent of unease. The young waitress sat in her car for a moment, gathering her thoughts before heading home. She thought about how life often threw unexpected challenges at people, how sometimes no matter how hard you worked, Circumstances beyond your control could change everything. And yet, she also knew that moments like this could be turning points, moments that tested your strength and resolve. She promised herself that she would use this moment to grow, to find a better path, and to keep moving forward no matter what. Driving home, she passed familiar streets. The neighborhoods where her children played, the parks she took them to, the grocery stores where she shopped. Each place reminded her of why she was working so hard, why she could not afford to give up. She thought about the sacrifices she had made, the dreams she had put on hold, and the resilience she had built over the years. And despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt a quiet determination settling in her chest, a sense that she would not let one moment define her entire life. When she arrived home, her children ran to greet her, their laughter filling the house. She hugged them tightly, feeling the warmth and love that had carried her through so many challenges. She knew that she had to stay strong, not just for herself, but for them. And as she sat down to listen to their stories of the day, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The job loss was a setback, yes, but it was not the end. There was still so much she could do, still so many ways to make a difference in her own life and in the lives of those she loved. That evening, she reflected on the events of the day. She thought about the CEO, the way he had dismissed her so quickly, the lack of understanding or compassion. She thought about the other staff, the customers, and the ripple effect of one small mistake. And she thought about herself, her strength, and her ability to face adversity head-on. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she also knew that she had the power to meet them with courage and determination. As she prepared for bed, she made a plan. She would continue working hard, seeking opportunities, and never letting a single moment of unfairness define her worth. She would write down her thoughts, her goals, and her dreams, keeping them close as a reminder of why she fought every day. And she would not allow bitterness or anger to take hold, because she knew that resilience and grace were more powerful than any moment of injustice. Finally, she closed her eyes, letting the exhaustion of the day wash over her. Fatigue. There was a quiet fire, a spark that would not be extinguished. She knew that life had more in store for her, that challenges would continue to come, but she was ready to face them. And somewhere deep inside, she held on to the belief that even in moments of loss and disappointment, there could be hope, growth, and new opportunities waiting just around the corner. Outside, the city lights twinkled, unaware of the struggles and triumphs of the people beneath them. The restaurant continued to hum with activity, and the CEO, now back in his office, reflected briefly on the events of the day, unaware that the story was far from over. And for the young waitress, the day ended not with despair, but with a quiet determination to keep moving forward, to rise above the challenges, and to never lose sight of the life she was building for herself and her children. After the difficult day at the restaurant, the young waitress returned home, her mind still spinning from the events that had unfolded. She walked through the front door, greeted by the laughter and energy of her children. They ran to her, full of excitement from their day at school, and she hugged them tightly, feeling the warmth and love that made all her struggles worthwhile. Despite the exhaustion and emotional weight she carried, she focused on them. Listening to every detail of their day, their small victories and funny moments, and letting their joy remind her why she worked so hard. Once the children had settled into their homework and evening routines, she sat down at the small kitchen table, a notebook and pen in front of her. Writing had become a way to process her thoughts and emotions, a quiet sanctuary where she could make sense of the world and plan her next steps. She began to jot down the events of the day, recounting every detail of the spill, the CEO's harsh words, and the mixture of shame, anger, and determination she had felt. Writing it all down helped her to step back and see the situation more clearly. It's not just as an unfair dismissal, but as an opportunity to grow and reassess her path. She reflected on her life before this job, the sacrifices she had made, and the challenges she faced as a single parent. Every day was a careful balance between work, childcare, and the endless responsibilities that came with providing for a family. She remembered the nights she stayed up late, helping with homework and preparing meals, the mornings she woke up before dawn to make sure her children were ready for school, and the countless times she had pushed herself to keep going even when her body and mind were tired. It wasn't easy, but she had learned to persevere. To find strength she didn't know she had, she thought about the CEO and the way he had dismissed her without understanding her circumstances or appreciating her dedication. She felt a surge of frustration and sadness, but she quickly reminded herself that his opinion did not define her worth. She had always believed that hard work, integrity, and resilience were more important than someone else's judgment. She had seen too many moments in life where people made quick decisions without knowing the whole story, and she knew that she could not let his harshness hold her back. As she wrote, she allowed herself to dream a little. She imagined a future where she didn't just survive, but thrived, a life where her children had security, opportunities, and happiness. She pictured herself in a place where her talents and dedication were recognized and appreciated, where her work mattered, and where she could walk into a workplace with confidence and pride. The act of dreaming, even for a few quiet minutes, reminded her that she still had hope and that the future was not yet written. The next morning, she woke early, as she always did, and prepared her children for school. She moved with efficiency, pouring breakfast, packing lunches, and tying shoelaces, all while keeping a steady calm that belied the storm of thoughts in her mind. She knew that she needed to stay strong and present for them, to show them that challenges could be faced with courage and determination. Once they were off to school, she sat down at the kitchen table again, thinking about her next steps. Losing this job was a setback, yes, but it was not the end of her journey. She needed to explore other opportunities, make connections, and find a way to provide for her family without compromising her values. She reached out to friends and former colleagues, letting them know she was looking for work. Some offered leads and advice, while others simply listened and encouraged her. Each conversation reminded her that she was not alone, that there were people who believed in her and were willing to support her in any way they could. It was a comforting thought, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, human connection could provide strength and guidance. Over the following days, she juggled multiple responsibilities, continuing to apply for jobs, attending interviews, and managing her household. Every day brought its own set of challenges, from navigating public transportation to balancing schedules, but she faced each obstacle with determination. She kept a steady routine, waking early, organizing her tasks, and making time for herself, even if only for a few quiet minutes to gather her thoughts. She knew that consistency and perseverance would carry her through this difficult period. Despite her busy schedule, she found moments of reflection and growth. She thought about her strengths, the skills she had developed through years of hard work, and the resilience she had built through life's challenges. She reminded herself that mistakes, setbacks, even unfair treatment were not indications of failure, but opportunities to learn, adapt, and grow stronger. Each day, she wrote in her notebook, recording her experiences, thoughts, and plans, turning her reflections into a roadmap for the future as she navigated her search for new employment. She encountered a variety of experiences. Some interviews went well, with employers appreciating her experience, dedication, and professionalism, while others were disappointing or discouraging. Each encounter tested her patience and resolve, but she refused to give up. She remembered the faces of her children, their trust and hope resting in her hands, and she pushed forward, determined to find a place where her work would be valued and respected. One afternoon, she received a phone call that would change the course of her journey. A restaurant manager she had worked with in the past wanted to speak with her about a potential position. They remembered her dedication, her work ethic, and the way she handled difficult situations with grace and professionalism. Excitement and nerves filled her as she listened carefully, asking questions and sharing her own experiences. It felt like a step forward, a small but significant victory that reminded her that persistence and resilience could lead to new opportunities. Over the next week, she prepared diligently for the interview, reviewing her experiences, practicing responses, and reflecting on the lessons she had learned from her previous job. She thought about the CEO, the spill, and the firing, not with bitterness, but as a reminder of her ability to endure and persevere. She knew that she had valuable skills, that she had integrity, and that her dedication and honesty would shine through if given the chance. When the day of the interview arrived, she dressed carefully, choosing attire that was professional yet comfortable, and made her way to the restaurant with a mixture of anticipation and calm determination. She was greeted warmly by the manager, who had already shared positive words about her with the staff. The conversation flowed naturally, with both parties discussing expectations, experiences, and the values that guided their work. She shared her story honestly, explaining her dedication to her family, her work ethic, and the lessons she had learned from challenges she had faced by the end of the interview. The manager smiled, impressed not only with her experience, but with the grace, resilience, and authenticity she had displayed. It was clear that her qualities went beyond skills and knowledge. They reflected character, integrity, and a strength that could not be measured by a single day or a single mistake. She left the restaurant feeling a renewed sense of hope and confidence, knowing that she had made a positive impression and that new opportunities were within reach. Back at home, she shared the experience with her children, celebrating small victories and reinforcing the importance of perseverance, honesty, and resilience. They listened eagerly, inspired by her determination and courage. The day ended with laughter, conversation, and quiet reflection, a reminder that even in the midst of challenges, life continued to offer moments of hope, joy, and connection. In the following weeks, the young waitress continued her search for work while also building her skills, exploring new opportunities, and strengthening her support network. She attended workshops, connected with mentors, and sought advice from experienced professionals. Each step was a reminder that growth often came through effort, persistence, and a willingness to embrace change. She faced each challenge with determination, learning to adapt, prioritize, and navigate obstacles with a sense of purpose and focus. Through it all, she never lost sight of her children, her family, or her values. She remained grounded in the things that mattered: honesty, hard work, and love. She continued to document her journey in her notebook, turning experiences, lessons, and reflections into a story of resilience and growth. Each entry served as a reminder that setbacks were not the end, but a step toward something greater, an opportunity to learn, improve, and move forward. And so life continued, filled with both challenges and small victories. The young waitress moved forward with courage and determination, learning from the past while embracing the possibilities of the future. Her journey was far from over, but with each step, she grew stronger, more confident, and more prepared to face whatever life had in store. She knew that setbacks would come, but she also knew that her resilience, integrity, and dedication would guide her through, lighting the path for herself and for her children. Days had passed since the incident at the restaurant, but the young waitress could not shake the memory of the CEO's words. The sting of being dismissed so publicly lingered, though she tried not to let it define her. Every time she thought about it, a mixture of frustration and resolve filled her heart. She refused to dwell on anger for too long, knowing that her energy was better spent planning her next steps rather than ruminating on what had already happened. One afternoon, after putting her children down for a short nap, she sat at the small kitchen table and stared at a blank piece of paper. The notebook she had been using to reflect on her life and organize her thoughts sat open beside her. She picked up a pen, her hand hovering over the paper, unsure of where to start. Finally, she began to write, letting her emotions guide her words. She wrote a note. It's not meant for anyone else, but as a way to express herself and to process the events of that day. Her words flowed naturally, filled with honesty and humility. She wrote about her dedication to her work, the pride she felt in serving others, and the challenges she faced as a single parent trying to provide for her children. She did not write to blame or shame anyone, not even the CEO who had fired her. Instead, she wrote about herself, her mistakes, and her hope for understanding and fairness. She included a sincere apology for the accident, explaining that it had been unintentional and that she valued her job and the people she worked with. She also expressed gratitude for the opportunity to work at the restaurant, emphasizing her respect for the staff and her desire to contribute meaningfully. As she finished writing, she folded the note carefully and placed it in an envelope. She felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief, because she had finally expressed the thoughts she had been carrying for days. And anxiety, because she knew that once the note reached its destination, she would have no control over how it would be received. She decided to leave it at the restaurant the next morning, discreetly placing it where the CEO would find it. The following day, she walked to the restaurant early, before the lunch rush began. The streets were quiet, the city still waking up. She felt a sense of calm as she approached the entrance, holding the envelope tightly in her hand. She slipped inside, unnoticed by the staff who were busy preparing for the day, and carefully placed the note on the desk near the manager's office. She left without drawing attention to herself, her heart pounding with anticipation and uncertainty. Meanwhile, the CEO was in his office, reviewing reports and preparing for upcoming meetings. His day had started like any other, filled with schedules, emails, and decisions that demanded his attention. The incident with the waitress had crossed his mind briefly, but he had pushed it aside, telling himself that mistakes like hers were unacceptable and that he had made the right decision. Yet a small, nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind, a quiet whisper questioning whether he had been too harsh when the manager entered the office later that morning. She noticed the envelope and brought it to the CEO's attention. He opened it casually, expecting perhaps a complaint or a note of apology from the staff. As he unfolded the paper and began to read, he paused. The words on the page were simple, heartfelt, and filled with sincerity. The young waitress explained the circumstances of the accident, shared her struggles as a single parent, and expressed her dedication to her work. She apologized for the mistake. But the note also conveyed her pride in her role and her respect for the people she served. The CEO read the note slowly, each word sinking in. He felt a shift in his perspective, a recognition that there was more to the situation than he had considered. He realized that his initial reaction had been quick and lacking in understanding. The humility and honesty in her words struck a chord, and he found himself reflecting on the decisions he made in his own life, the times he had been harsh or dismissive, and the consequences of those actions. He reread the note, noting the care and thoughtfulness behind every sentence. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a sincere attempt to communicate and make sense of a difficult moment. For the first time, he truly saw the young waitress not just as an employee who had made a mistake, but as a person with responsibilities, dreams, and challenges that went far beyond what he could see in the brief. Interaction at the restaurant, the CEO leaned back in his chair, taking a moment to absorb the impact of her words. He realized that he had underestimated the strength and character required to balance work, family, and personal struggles. The note had opened a window into her life, and it was a perspective he had never considered. He felt a mix of guilt, respect, and admiration, emotions that were foreign to him in a professional context. The experience forced him to confront the limitations of his own judgment and the importance of empathy in leadership as the day progressed. He found himself thinking repeatedly about the note. He revisited the details of the incident, comparing his initial assumptions with the reality she had shared. Each reflection deepened his understanding and highlighted the difference between snap judgments and informed decisions. He began to recognize that his role as a leader was not just to enforce standards, but also to nurture, support, and guide those under his direction. This realization was both humbling and enlightening, offering a lesson he would carry forward. Meanwhile, the young waitress continued her day. Unaware of the effect her note had on the CEO, she focused on her family, her responsibilities, and her search for new opportunities. She remained determined and resilient, knowing that whatever happened with the note, she had expressed herself honestly and with integrity. The act of writing it had given her a sense of closure and empowerment, a feeling that she had taken control of a situation that had initially felt overwhelming and unfair. As evening approached, the CEO requested to meet with the manager privately. He wanted to learn more about the young waitress, her performance, and her background. The manager spoke highly of her, describing her dedication, professionalism, and the respect she commanded among her colleagues. The CEO listened intently, absorbing each detail and reflecting on how it aligned with the sentiments expressed in her note. His initial perception of her had been narrow, focused solely on a single mistake, but he now saw the broader picture, the depth of her character and the value she brought to the workplace. Over the next few days, the CEO continued to think about the young waitress and the lessons her note had imparted. He began to question his own approach to management, considering ways he could be more compassionate and understanding while maintaining standards. The experience sparked a period of introspection, prompting him to evaluate not only his decisions, but also the culture and environment he had fostered within the company. The note had become more than just a message about a mistake. It had become a catalyst for reflection, growth, and change. For the young waitress, life continued with its usual rhythm. She balanced work, family, and personal growth, always striving to do her best despite the obstacles she faced. She remained hopeful, resilient, and determined, knowing that her efforts and character would eventually be recognized. The act of writing the note had strengthened her resolve, reinforcing her belief that honesty, humility, and perseverance were powerful tools in navigating life's challenges. Unbeknownst to her, the note had set off a chain of events that would alter the trajectory of her life. The CEO, deeply impacted by her words, began to take steps that would eventually lead to a meaningful encounter, one that would test his newfound understanding and provide an opportunity for reconciliation. The sincerity and thoughtfulness of the note had bridged a gap between two very different worlds, creating the possibility for connection, recognition, and change. Through it all, the young waitress remained grounded in her values, focusing on what she could control and continuing to nurture her family, her skills, and her dreams. The note was a testament to her strength, resilience, and integrity, a reflection of the person she was and the life she was building, despite setbacks and challenges. It was a quiet but powerful statement that actions and words, when guided by honesty and heart, could resonate far beyond the immediate moment and influence lives in unexpected ways. As days turned into weeks, the young waitress continued to live her life with determination and purpose. While the CEO quietly reflected on the lessons he had learned, the note remained a pivotal moment, a reminder of the impact that empathy, understanding, and human connection could have, even in a professional setting. It highlighted the importance of seeing beyond surface-level mistakes, recognizing the humanity in others, and approaching situations with thoughtfulness and care. Life moved forward, filled with challenges, opportunities, and moments of reflection. Both the young waitress and the CEO were changed by the events surrounding the note, each gaining insight into resilience, empathy, and the power of honest communication. The note had not only expressed her truth, but it also opened the door to understanding, growth, and a possibility for change that neither could have anticipated. It was a turning point, a moment that would shape the choices, perspectives, and futures of both individuals in ways that would unfold in the days to come. The days after the note had been delivered passed quietly, but inside the CEO, a storm of thought continued to brew. He had read the words over and over, turning them around in his mind, thinking about the young waitress and her life, her struggles, and the grace with which she had handled a situation that could have broken anyone. He felt a mix of admiration and regret, recognizing the harshness of his initial reaction and the need to reconsider not only his judgment of her, but the way he treated others. He began to notice small details in the restaurant that he had never paid attention to before: the way the staff moved with efficiency and care, how they managed to serve dozens of customers at once, the little smiles exchanged between team members during difficult moments. He saw that the young waitress had been more than competent. She had been attentive, professional, and deeply committed. He realized that he had overlooked these qualities in his rush to judge a single mistake. The weight of that realization pressed on him, leaving a quiet ache in his chest. At home, he couldn't stop thinking about the note. He read it again that evening, taking his time to absorb each word, each sentence filled with humility and sincerity. He wondered about the life of the woman who had written it, sacrifices she had made, the responsibilities she carried, and the courage it took to face him without anger or bitterness. Her words had a quiet power, a human honesty that cut through the corporate armor he usually wore and left him questioning his own approach too. Leadership and fairness. The CEO found himself replaying the scene at the restaurant over and over. He remembered the moment he fired her, the firmness of his own voice, the expressions of the other staff, and the stunned silence that had filled the room. He recalled her composed response, her calm acceptance, and the way she had carried herself despite the humiliation. For the first time, he saw her as a person rather than an employee, a human being with fears, responsibilities, and dignity. He realized that he had failed to recognize her humanity in that moment, and the recognition unsettled him. In the following days, the CEO began to take small steps to change the way he approached his work and interactions with employees. He observed more carefully, listened more openly, and considered the human impact of his decisions. He started to understand that leadership was not just about enforcing standards and demanding results. It was also about empathy, respect, and the ability to recognize the strengths and struggles of the people around him. The note had become a catalyst for personal growth, forcing him to confront his own blind spots and reevaluate his priorities. Meanwhile, the young waitress continued her life unaware of the effect her words had caused. She focused on her children, her responsibilities, and the opportunities she was exploring. Every day she balanced her time with care, managing household tasks, nurturing her children, and taking steps toward new employment. She remained resilient, persistent, and optimistic, refusing to let the setback define her. The act of writing the note had given her a sense of agency, a quiet confidence that she could face adversity with dignity and strength. The CEO, now more reflective, requested a meeting with the manager to discuss the young waitress. He wanted to know more about her work ethic, her history, and her character. The manager spoke warmly, highlighting her professionalism, dedication, and the respect she commanded among her colleagues. He listened intently, absorbing each detail, and felt a growing sense of responsibility for his own actions. He realized that the way he had treated her was not just a matter of professional judgment, but also a reflection of his character and the culture he fostered within his company. He began to think about how to make amends. He wanted to acknowledge his mistake, to show that he had recognized her value, and to offer a gesture of reconciliation. He knew that words alone might not be enough. He needed to act in a way that demonstrated sincerity and respect. The thought of reaching out to her filled him with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. As he understood the gravity of the moment and the importance of approaching it with genuine care, one morning, he decided to visit the restaurant personally. Outside of peak hours, so he could speak privately with her, he felt a strange nervousness, something he was not accustomed to in his professional life. The receptionist guided him to the back office, where he waited while the young waitress finished her shift. When she walked in, he noticed the calm confidence in her posture, the quiet determination in her eyes, and the sense of purpose she carried. It was a reminder of the strength and resilience that had impressed him so deeply in her note. He began the conversation. By acknowledging his mistake, he admitted that he had acted hastily and without understanding the full situation. He explained that he had read her note and had taken time to reflect on its meaning, and that he now understood the depth of her character and the dedication she brought to her work. His voice was steady, sincere, and filled with a humility that was unusual for him. She listened quietly, her expression thoughtful, as she considered his words. There was no immediate reaction of anger or resentment, only a careful observation, as if she were weighing the truth of his sincerity. The CEO continued, expressing his desire to make amends. He acknowledged the impact his decision had had on her life, the stress it caused, and the way it might have shaken her confidence. He offered her the opportunity to return to her position, with the assurance that her contributions would be valued and respected. He also spoke about the potential for advancement, highlighting the skills and qualities he had come to recognize through her note and through the manager's feedback. The offer was generous, thoughtful, and intended to convey genuine recognition and respect. She considered the offer carefully. Her mind wandered to the days and weeks since the incident, the emotional and practical challenges she had faced, and the resilience she had shown. She thought about her children, her responsibilities, and the importance of finding stability and respect in her work. She realized that this was an opportunity not only for employment but for validation, acknowledgement, and the chance to reclaim a sense of dignity. After a moment of reflection, she accepted the offer, not with blind enthusiasm, but with a measured sense of hope and a cautious optimism that allowed her to maintain her strength and self-respect. Over the next several weeks, she returned to work, greeted warmly by the staff and supported by the manager. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her dedication, integrity, and perseverance had been recognized. The CEO observed from a distance initially, watching her interactions with colleagues and customers, noting the professionalism, care, and attention she brought to every task. He continued to reflect on the lessons he had learned, understanding that leadership required more than authority. It required empathy, awareness, and the ability to see the person behind the role. As she settled back into her routine, she continued to balance work and family life, navigating challenges with resilience and determination. The experience of being dismissed and then reinstated became a story of growth, learning, and human connection. She recognized the power of expressing oneself honestly, standing firm in one's values, and facing adversity with grace. For the CEO, the experience had been transformative, teaching him humility, the importance of reflection, and the value of empathy and leadership. The relationship between the young waitress and the CEO remained professional, yet it carried a subtle shift, a mutual recognition of respect, understanding, and the lessons learned from a difficult experience. The note had been the catalyst, bridging the gap between two very different perspectives and creating the possibility for growth, reconciliation, and mutual appreciation. Life at the restaurant continued with its usual rhythm, but the impact of the events lingered. The young waitress carried herself with quiet confidence, aware of the strength she had demonstrated and the respect she had earned. The CEO approached his role with a new perspective, understanding the human element in every interaction and the importance of fairness, compassion, and thoughtful judgment. Through this experience, both individuals grew in ways they had not anticipated. The young waitress gained validation, recognition, and the reassurance that integrity and resilience were powerful forces. The CEO learned humility, empathy, and the transformative power of listening and reflecting. Their paths had crossed in a moment of tension, but through honesty, thoughtfulness, and courage, they had both been changed for the better. The story of the note and its aftermath became a quiet legend within the restaurant, a reminder to staff and leaders alike that empathy, respect, and understanding could bridge gaps, heal wounds, and foster growth. It illustrated that, even in moments of conflict and mistake, there was the potential for connection, learning, and transformation. The young waitress continued her life with purpose, pride, and hope, carrying forward the lessons learned, while the CEO embraced a more thoughtful, compassionate approach to leadership, forever shaped by the words of one courageous and sincere individual. The young waitress returned to work after the CEO's personal outreach, feeling a mixture of nervousness and quiet pride. She had walked through the doors many times before, but this time was different. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in the air, a subtle shift that told her the events of the past weeks had left a mark. Her colleagues welcomed her back warmly, offering smiles and words of encouragement. She felt a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of her, its own strength. She approached her work with the same dedication and care as always, yet there was a lightness to her steps. She had learned that resilience was not just about enduring hardship, but about acknowledging pain, reflecting on it, and moving forward with intention. Every customer she served, every tray she carried, and every interaction she had carried the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth and her ability to make a difference. No matter the circumstances, the CEO continued to watch from a distance. Observing the way she interacted with the staff and customers, he noticed her attention to detail, her patience with difficult patrons, and the respect she inspired in her colleagues. He reflected on the lessons her note had taught him and on the humility required to acknowledge mistakes. He began to consider how he could foster a culture in his company that valued not only competence but also character, empathy, and integrity. Her presence served as a reminder of the human element in every workplace interaction, something he had overlooked in the past. In private moments, he thought about the courage it took for her to write that note, to express her truth honestly and vulnerably. He recognized that it had not been easy for her to put herself out there, especially in the face of someone with power and authority. Her words had touched him deeply, forcing him to confront his own assumptions and prejudices. He realized that leadership was not about asserting control, but about guiding, understanding, and inspiring others. As the weeks went by, the young waitress continued to thrive in her role. She took on new responsibilities, mentoring newer staff and helping to streamline operations with her experience and insight. The management team began to notice her contributions and the positive impact she had on the restaurant's atmosphere. She was no longer just an employee. She was a pillar of the team, someone who others looked up to for guidance, support, and inspiration. The CEO scheduled a private meeting with her one afternoon. He wanted to acknowledge her contributions, express his appreciation, and discuss her future within the company. The conversation was candid and sincere. He shared how her note had changed his perspective, how it had prompted him to reflect on his actions and leadership style, and how it had influenced his approach to managing the restaurant and the company as a whole. She listened quietly, feeling a mix of validation, relief, and quiet satisfaction. The conversation was a reminder that honesty and integrity could create change. Even in situations that initially seemed hopeless, he offered her opportunities for advancement, roles that recognized her talents and dedication. She accepted with careful consideration, understanding the value of both the recognition and the trust placed in her. This was more than just a promotion. It was an acknowledgement of her worth, her perseverance, and the lessons she had embodied through her actions. The gesture reinforced the importance of staying true to oneself, maintaining integrity, and demonstrating resilience in the face of adversity. The restaurant itself began to feel different. The staff noticed the subtle but meaningful changes in the workplace culture. There was more open communication, a greater sense of respect among employees, and a shared understanding that mistakes were opportunities for learning rather than punishment. The young waitress played a key role in this transformation, not only through her work, but through the example she set in handling challenges with grace, humility, and strength. Outside the restaurant, her life continued with the usual rhythms and responsibilities. She balanced work, family, and personal growth with care, always mindful of the lessons she had learned. Her children noticed the change in her demeanor, the quiet confidence that came from knowing she had faced hardship and emerged stronger. She shared stories with them, not to boast, but to teach them about perseverance, honesty, and the power of facing challenges with courage and dignity. The CEO, meanwhile, applied the lessons he had learned to other areas of his company. He became more attentive to the needs and contributions of employees, more mindful of the impact of his decisions, and more open to listening and understanding. The incident with the young waitress had become a turning point, a reminder of the importance of empathy, reflection, and the human element in leadership. His approach to management evolved, influenced by a deep respect for character and integrity that he had not fully appreciated before. Over time, the story of the young waitress and the note became a quiet inspiration within the restaurant and the company. Staff members who had witnessed the events reflected on the lessons it offered, from the importance of honest communication to the power of resilience and perseverance. The CEO occasionally shared the story as an example of how leaders could grow and learn from those around them, regardless of rank or position. For the young waitress, the experience reinforced her belief in the value of her own voice and actions. She knew that setbacks and challenges were inevitable, but she also understood that how she responded to them mattered more than the obstacles themselves. Her life continued with a renewed sense of hope and purpose, guided by the principles of honesty, integrity, and resilience. She was more confident in her abilities, more assured of her worth, and more committed to creating a life that reflected her values and aspirations. The relationship between her and the CEO remained professional but evolved into one marked by mutual respect. They had navigated a difficult moment together, and in doing so, both had grown. The CEO had learned humility and empathy, while the young waitress had experienced validation and recognition. Their paths had crossed in a moment of tension and misunderstanding, but through honesty, reflection, and courage, they had found common ground and understanding. The young waitress continued to make an impact, not only in her workplace, but in the lives of her children and the people around her. She became a model of perseverance and integrity, demonstrating that one's character could shine through even in the most challenging circumstances. Her journey was a testament to the power of human connection, the importance of resilience, and the transformative potential of empathy and understanding. The CEO, too, carried the lessons of the experience forward. He approached his leadership role with greater awareness, thoughtfulness, and compassion. He recognized the value of seeing beyond mistakes, understanding the human side of every employee, and creating an environment where people felt respected, supported, and empowered. The young waitress had taught him lessons that could not be found in reports, metrics, or boardroom discussions. They were lessons about life, humanity, and the impact of genuine understanding. Together, though their interaction had been brief and fraught with tension at first, they had shaped each other's perspectives and lives in meaningful ways. The young waitress had reclaimed her dignity and proven the strength of her character, while the CEO had learned the humility and insight that comes from listening, reflecting, and recognizing the value in others. Their story became an enduring reminder that even in moments of challenge and conflict, honesty, courage, and empathy could lead to growth, reconciliation, and lasting impact. In the months that followed, the young waitress continued to thrive, her work and her life enriched by the lessons of the past. She embraced new opportunities, nurtured her family, and carried herself with confidence and grace. The CEO's approach to leadership continued to evolve, influenced by the lessons of empathy, reflection, and understanding. Together, their story remained a testament to the power of human connection, the importance of perseverance, and the lasting impact of integrity and courage in the face of adversity. Life moved forward, filled with its usual mix of challenges, victories, and small moments of joy. The young waitress faced each day with resilience, determination, and an unwavering sense of self-worth. The CEO navigated his responsibilities with greater awareness, guided by the lessons he had learned from someone who had shown him the quiet power of honesty, humility, and strength. Their paths had intersected in a moment of conflict, but the impact of that intersection resonated far beyond the initial incident, shaping both of their lives in ways that would continue to unfold for years to come.